It started with a question so small, so harmless. It shouldn't have hurt at all. We were sitting at her kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the smell of coffee between us. And I said softly, "So, when's the baby shower?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, like a storm was passing behind them. Then she said it. "It happened yesterday, Mom. You weren't invited." The words landed quietly, but they burned. I could hear the ticking clock on the wall, sharp and deliberate, as if it wanted me to count every second of that silence. Yesterday. She said it like it was nothing. A fact, already done, already gone. Yesterday was Sunday. I remember because I spent the entire day waiting. I even baked her favorite cake, the one she always begged for when she was little, cornmeal and fennel. The smell filled the house like memory does, warm, innocent, full of ghosts. I sat there across from her, pretending not to break. "Oh," I said, my voice small, foreign. "That's nice." She nodded, stirred her coffee, didn't look at me. There are moments in life that don't scream, they whisper. And sometimes, that whisper is enough to end everything you thought was safe. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to my own breathing, shallow, uneven. I could still hear her voice repeating in my head. "It happened yesterday. You weren't invited." Do you know that feeling? When the person you raised builds a world that doesn't have a door for you anymore? When love stops being welcome, and you don't even know why? I got home, and the first thing I saw was the cake. Still warm, still waiting. And suddenly, I didn't know what to do with my hands, or my heart. The cake was still on the counter when I walked in, untouched, perfect, mocking me. The smell that once felt like comfort now felt like humiliation. I took the pan with both hands and dropped it straight into the trash. It landed with a dull, final sound. It wasn't about the cake. It was about everything I had poured into her. The years, the patience, the quiet sacrifices she never even noticed. And just like that, all of it was sitting there, buried under crumbs and regret. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the wall. The clock read 7:14 p.m. I remember because time suddenly felt important, like it was marking the moment something inside me began to change. I thought about calling her, about pretending it didn't hurt, about saying, "It's okay, sweetheart. I understand." But for once, I didn't move toward forgiveness. I stayed still. Instead, I opened my phone. And there they were. The photos. My daughter glowing, surrounded by pink balloons, laughter, gifts, love. Her husband's hands resting on her belly like a promise. And right beside her, my sister. My own sister. I stared at that image for a long time. Long enough for the smile on my daughter's face to turn into something else in my eyes. A wound, stretched wide and smiling. That was when the silence inside me shifted. It wasn't pain anymore. It was something colder. Something that didn't want to cry. It wanted to understand. To remember. To respond. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just sat there and let the quiet build inside me until it became a decision. You know that moment, don't you? When love finally stops begging to be seen and starts watching instead. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft and slow. It sounded like the world was exhaling. And I just sat there, listening, feeling the weight of every drop against the window. Each one whispering the same word over and over. Enough. Sometimes telling is the only way to keep breathing. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from right now? The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want to. The house felt different. Still. Hollow. As if every sound from the night before had been swallowed by the walls. I made coffee, black and strong, the way I used to drink it before life started tasting too sweet. I didn't check my phone, didn't look for her message, because I already knew there wouldn't be one. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years, and started writing. It wasn't a letter. It was something else. It was a list. A list of everything I had done for her. The forgotten favors, the sleepless nights, the apologies I made just to keep peace that wasn't even mine to keep. Each line felt like reclaiming oxygen. You see, revenge doesn't always begin with rage. Sometimes, it begins with silence, the kind that organizes you. That morning, I realized I didn't want her apology. I wanted clarity. I started thinking about the photos, the smiles, the balloons, the family I wasn't part of. And something inside me whispered, they built a celebration without you, so build something of your own. That thought stayed with me like a seed in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I would no longer live as an afterthought in their story. By noon, I had cleaned the entire house, every corner, every shelf, every trace of waiting. It felt like I was preparing a stage, not for them, but for me. And then I found it, an old box in the attic, full of photos of her childhood, her first day at school, her braces, her prom. Every picture was a memory of love that didn't ask for permission to exist. I laid them out on the floor, one by one, and looked at them in silence. Do you know what it's like to look at someone you love and realize you don't recognize them anymore? It's a strange kind of death, quiet, invisible, but final. The sun began to rise higher, washing the room in pale gold. And for the first time since she told me, you weren't invited, I felt powerful, not healed, not happy, but grounded. Because now I knew, she may have erased me from her celebration, but I was about to remind her who taught her how to hold a knife without shaking. That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the rain draw long silver lines on the glass. It's funny how quiet can sound so loud when you've finally stopped waiting for someone to apologize. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I used to be. The rage had cooled into precision. And precision, my dear, is far more dangerous. I started small. No confrontation, no tears. Just a quiet rewriting of my own life. I deleted the family group chat, blocked my sister, erased my daughter's number from my favorites. Not out of hate, but out of freedom. I wanted her to feel it. The shift. That slow, unsettling realization that the person who used to orbit her life had disappeared without noise. Because the truth is, absence speaks louder than anger ever could. A week passed, then 2. No messages, no visits. Until one evening my phone buzzed, her name lighting up the screen like a ghost. I didn't answer. She called again. Still, I stayed still. It's strange, the peace that comes from not chasing the explanation you'll never get. Instead, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat outside on the porch, the cold air wrapping around me like a new kind of skin. Through the quiet, I remembered the way she used to run to me when she was little, mud on her shoes, hair tangled, calling, "Mom, look what I made." And I smiled. Not out of nostalgia, but recognition. Because I finally understood something. I made her. And I could unmake her too. Not with cruelty, but with distance. That's the kind of revenge people never see coming. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth and start living it. 2 days later, she came by. I saw her car from the window, headlights cutting through the dark. For a moment I froze, my hand halfway to the doorknob. Then I stepped back, let her knock, once, twice, and then leave. I stood there in the silence that followed, feeling my pulse steady, my heart strangely calm. Because this quiet, deliberate not answering, was the loudest thing I had ever done. You ever felt that? That moment when your silence becomes your power? It's intoxicating and terrifying. The rain started again, tapping gently against the window, like the world was clapping softly for my rebirth. Sometimes, telling the story is the only way to keep your hands from shaking. Subscribe to the channel and tell me, where are you listening from right now? It took exactly 19 days for the silence to start working. That's when she called again. This time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded unsure. Her voice cracked halfway through the voicemail. "Mom, are you okay? I haven't heard from you. Can you please call me back?" I listened to that message 3 times. Not out of longing, but curiosity. It's fascinating how people start to miss you only when your absence becomes inconvenient. The truth is, silence doesn't just protect you. It teaches others who they are without you. And from what I could tell, she didn't like who she was becoming. 2 days later, my sister showed up. No warning, no call. Just her car pulling into my driveway like a memory I didn't ask for. She stepped out wearing guilt like perfume. Too heavy. Too obvious. "Hey," she said. "You've been quiet." We were worried. I almost laughed. It's always we when they feel guilty, never I. I opened the door just enough for her to see me, but not enough for her to step inside. "Everything's fine," I said, calm, steady. "Just been busy." She blinked, caught off guard by the normalcy in my tone. Because what they expect, after betrayal, is drama. They expect tears, shouting, desperation. But what they got was composure, and that terrified them. She glanced past me, trying to peek inside the house. Her eyes landed on the dining table, empty, clean, untouched. No family photos, no flowers, nothing that belonged to the version of me they once knew. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked. I smiled, the kind of smile that ends conversations. I've never been better. When she left, I stood at the window and watched her car disappear into the rain. And for the first time, I realized that control doesn't come from being heard. It comes from choosing what stays unspoken. That night, I sat by the fireplace with a glass of wine, watching the flame dance against the glass. It flickered like a heartbeat, slow, steady, alive. I wasn't lonely. I was becoming. Have you ever felt that quiet, powerful shift? When the people who broke you start to feel your absence like a bruise they can't explain? That's what this was. It wasn't revenge in the way people imagine it. It was transformation, disguised as silence. The first real crack appeared a week later. She showed up at my door. No warning, no call. Just a hesitant knock, the kind that doesn't belong to someone confident, but to someone suddenly unsure of where they stand. Through the peephole, I saw her. Hair tied back, eyes red, hands resting on that small curve of her stomach. For a second, my heart betrayed me. It whispered, "That's your baby. That's your little girl." But I didn't open the door. I stood there, listening as she shifted her weight, breathing shallowly, whispering through the wood. "Mom, please. I don't know what I did wrong." The irony made me smile, not cruelly, just sadly, because I realized something she didn't. People rarely notice your pain until it inconveniences their comfort. She stayed for maybe 3 minutes before leaving, and when her footsteps faded down the porch, I finally exhaled. The silence between us wasn't punishment anymore. It was a mirror, and she was finally starting to see herself in it. Later that night, she sent me a text. "I miss you." No explanation, no apology. Just 3 words, small, trembling, human. I read it once. Then I turned off my phone. You see, real power isn't about revenge. It's about restraint. It's about knowing you could answer, you could forgive, you could fold back into the story they wrote for you, and then choosing not to. 2 days passed before my sister called. She sounded shaken. "She's been crying a lot," she said. She says you hate her. I laughed softly. I don't hate her. I'm just letting her learn. Because that's what they don't tell you about silence. It's not the absence of love. It's the boundary love needed all along. That night, I went out for a walk. The air was cold, the streets quiet. Leaves crunched beneath my shoes like soft echoes. For the first time in months, I felt light. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and that, in itself, felt like justice. Have you ever reached that point? When you realize you don't need closure from the person who hurt you, because your peace is the closure. The moon was high, pale, watching, and under its light I finally smiled. Not because I won, but because I no longer needed to. Sometimes telling your story is the only way to make peace with its silence. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from right now? I heard about it from the neighbor first. She stopped me outside one morning, holding her grocery bags, her tone halfway between curiosity and concern. Your daughter's been having a tough time, hasn't she? I raised an eyebrow, pretending I didn't know what she meant. She hasn't been sleeping, the woman went on. The lights are on all night. I think I heard arguing. Arguing. That word lingered in the air like smoke. It felt strange, hearing about my daughter's unraveling from someone else's mouth. Strange, but not surprising. Because guilt is like water. You can try to contain it, but it always finds its way through the cracks. And my silence had become the crack in her perfect life. I went back inside, closed the door, and just stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt inevitable. Later that evening, I checked her social media, something I hadn't done in weeks. The posts were gone. No smiling pictures, no pastel balloons, no curated happiness, just emptiness. The baby shower photos, deleted, every single one. That's when I knew. She wasn't just missing me, she was questioning herself. You see, guilt doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence trying to mirror yours, as if by imitating your stillness, they can undo what they broke. 2 nights later, my sister called again. She didn't even say hello. She's not eating. She's not talking, she said. You need to call her. I almost laughed. Now I needed to? After being erased, excluded, replaced? It's funny how pain circles back when people finally feel it themselves. I told her gently, she'll be fine. She's learning what silence sounds like on the other side. Then I hung up. Afterward, I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like it was tracing veins. Slow, delicate, human. And I whispered to the night, I'm not doing this to hurt her. I'm doing this so she remembers. Have you ever loved someone enough to let them feel the weight of losing you? Not as revenge, but as education. That's where I was. Somewhere between sorrow and serenity. It was late, close to midnight, when the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but something in the rhythm of the calls told me it wasn't her this time. It was him, my daughter's husband. His voice was tired, trembling around the edges. Mrs. Taylor, he said softly, I'm sorry to call so late. I don't know what to do with her anymore. The way he said her, as if she were something fragile, unfamiliar, told me everything. They had started to fracture. And when the foundation of guilt begins to shake, love can't hold steady. He went on. She cries at night, says she ruined everything. She keeps asking why you won't talk to her. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang there, thick, deliberate. Then I said, because some lessons aren't taught with words. He didn't know what to say after that. Neither did I. We stayed on the phone, breathing into the same quiet for a moment that felt too intimate for strangers and too distant for family. After he hung up, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, The house was so quiet that even the sound of the faucet felt sacred. I leaned against the counter and realized the balance had shifted completely. They had erased me to keep their peace, and now their peace depended on my presence. It was poetic in a way. Pain always comes back home. It just wears different clothes. The next morning, my sister sent me a message. "She's thinking about naming the baby after you." I stared at the words for a long time. Naming a baby after someone you excluded. It almost sounded biblical, as if she was trying to baptize herself in remorse. But I didn't reply, because forgiveness given too early loses its weight. Instead, I stepped outside into the garden. The air was damp, cold, alive. The roses were still blooming, despite the season ending, their petals heavy, almost breaking from the rain. I touched one gently and whispered, "You see? Beauty survives what neglect can't kill." It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was justice wrapped in quiet. And deep down, I knew. The more they tried to fix the mess without me, the more they would feel the absence I had turned into armor. Have you ever watched karma do your work for you? It's slow, elegant, patient. And when it arrives, it never knocks. Sometimes, telling your story is the only way to make sense of survival. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from right now? It was a Saturday morning when she came back. No warning this time, no calls, no messages. Just the soft, uncertain sound of a car door closing outside my house. I saw her from the window, standing there, hugging her coat tight against the cold. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in spirit. Like something had been chipped away, piece by piece, since the last time I saw her. For a moment, I considered pretending not to be home. But then she looked up at the window, and even through the glass, I saw it. The thing I had been waiting for. Not guilt. Not pity. Remorse. When I opened the door, she didn't speak. Her eyes filled before her mouth could. She tried to hold it back, but the tears came anyway. Fast, desperate, unfiltered. "Mom," she said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't move, didn't rush to hold her, didn't make it easy, because part of me still needed to hear why." "Why didn't you invite me?" I asked quietly. The words left my mouth calm. Too calm, like I had practiced them 1,000 times in my head. She looked down, wiping her face, her voice trembling like a confession she had rehearsed, but never believed she'd say aloud. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," she whispered. "It wasn't even my idea." I waited. Every second stretched long enough to feel eternal. "It was Aunt Claire," she finally said, my sister's name falling like glass between us. "She said you'd make things about you, that it would be awkward, that maybe it was better if we just avoided drama." Drama. That word again. The one people use to hide their cruelty behind politeness. The one that turns love into a liability. I nodded slowly, feeling something shift behind my ribs. Not shock. Not even betrayal. Just a deep, heavy understanding that sometimes the people who protect you from pain are the ones who caused it in the first place. She kept talking, words tumbling out now like a dam breaking. "She said you'd embarrass me, that you'd try to take over, that you'd ruin it." Her voice cracked again. I didn't believe her, not really, but I didn't stop her either. And that was it. That was the knife. Not the cut, the silence after it. Have you ever realized that the wound wasn't from the action itself, but from the moment someone you love chose not to defend you? That's what it felt like. A quiet, slow death in real time. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The way her hands shook. The way her eyes begged for something I didn't know if I could still give. And I said, barely above a whisper, "You let her teach you to love me like a stranger." She cried harder after that, and for the first time, I didn't stop her. Some truths need to bleed before they can heal. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where everything had ended months ago. Only now, it wasn't coffee between us. It was truth. Raw, trembling, late. Her hands were restless, tracing the rim of the mug I'd given her. She looked around the room, as if trying to remember the version of home she had abandoned. "It's so quiet here," she said softly. "Yes," I answered. "It's been quiet since you left." She winced. I saw her throat tighten. Then the words came, slow, heavy. "After the shower, I thought about calling you, but I felt ashamed. Everyone was laughing, posting pictures, and I just kept thinking about you, about the empty chair. The empty chair, the one I set out that day without admitting why. I remember how I'd placed it near the window, facing the light, as if some part of me still believed she'd come knocking. I tried to convince myself you didn't care," she went on, "that maybe you'd moved on. But when you stopped calling, when you didn't answer, I realized I'd lost something I didn't know how to get back." Her voice broke again. "I let her turn me against you. Aunt Claire said you were jealous, that you wanted attention, that you'd make a scene. I thought she was protecting me, but she was protecting herself." The air in the room felt thick, like grief made visible. "She's always hated the way you take up space," my daughter whispered. "The way people listen when you talk. She didn't want you there because she knew the light would find you again." That line hit something deep. Not because it flattered me, but because it explained everything. I wasn't left out by accident. I was erased on purpose. I stared at her, this woman who used to fit in my arms like forgiveness. And I thought, how do you punish someone who's already punishing herself? She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold it either. Instead, I said, "Do you understand now why silence was all I had left?" She nodded through tears. "Yes, and it's louder than anything I've ever heard." Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves brushed against the window, like the world was listening too. I could smell rain coming. Sharp, electric, clean. And I thought maybe this was the sound of something ending gently. Forgiveness didn't rush in. It lingered, cautious, standing at the doorway of my heart, like a guest who wasn't sure if she was welcome yet. But I could feel her approaching. You ever notice how grief changes shape when you finally stop fighting it? It turns into mercy, slow, hesitant, but real. She whispered, "Mom, can I come back home for a while?" And I said the only thing that felt true. Home never left you. You did. Then the rain began. Steady, deliberate, almost rhythmic. Each drop sounded like a promise. Not healed, but healing. Sometimes telling your story is the only way to breathe again. Subscribe to the channel. And tell me, where are you listening from right now? I knew she'd come. People like Claire always do. They circle back when their version of the story starts falling apart. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard her car in the driveway, the same silver sedan she'd driven to that baby shower I was never invited to. For a moment, I stood at the window, just watching. She stepped out wearing her usual mask. Calm, polished, unbothered. But her hands betrayed her, shaking ever so slightly as she adjusted her jacket. I didn't open the door right away. Let her wait. Let her feel, even for a moment, what silence tastes like. When I finally opened it, she smiled that tight, diplomatic smile, the one people wear when they're not sure who's winning. "Hey," she said. "Claire." Her name came out like a stone. Heavy. Honest. She looked past me, like she was searching for an opening, a weakness. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, but only barely. "You already have," I said. "Just not through the front door." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, keeping my voice even, "that when you convinced my daughter to exclude me, you walked into my home through her heart. The color drained from her face. Look, I never meant— Yes, you did, I cut in. People don't destroy families by accident, Claire. They do it because it makes them feel powerful. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Just silence. The kind that settles between people when the truth finally shows up uninvited. She glanced around the room, the bare walls, the quiet air. You've changed, she said. I had to, I replied. You made sure of it. Her eyes softened, just a little. I thought I was helping, she murmured. No, I said. You thought you were managing. You always needed to be the center, even if it meant breaking the circle. She looked away then, out the window, toward the trees moving in the wind. Her voice was small when she said, she was scared, you know. Scared that you'd take over, that you'd make her feel small at her own celebration. I took a step closer, not in anger, but in truth. And you never stopped to ask why she thought she had to shrink around me. Maybe because she's watched you try to do the same all her life. For a second, she couldn't look at me. Because that was it. The moment she saw herself in the damage. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Didn't ask for an apology. I just let the truth sit between us like smoke. There's a kind of justice that doesn't come with punishment, only exposure. And standing there, in that quiet, I realized she was already living in her own consequence. Have you ever looked at someone who hurt you and realized you don't need to hurt them back, because life already has? That's what this felt like. A release. Slow. Inevitable. She stood in my living room, silent, her hands clutching the strap of her purse like it was something holy. For the first time in years, Claire didn't look like the older sister who always had control. She looked small, human, almost sorry. But sorry isn't the same as accountability. Do you even know what you took from me? I asked. She hesitated. I thought it was just one afternoon. One afternoon, I repeated, my voice breaking into something I didn't expect. Not anger, not pain, but disbelief. You erased me from my daughter's joy, from her memory. You turned me into a ghost in my own family. That's not an afternoon, Claire. That's a lifetime. She sat down, finally, her shoulders falling like she was surrendering to something she'd been running from. I was jealous, she whispered. It was almost too quiet to hear. Of what? I asked. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. You. Always you. The way people listen when you speak. The way Mom used to look at you. Proud, warm. I wanted that. And when I couldn't have it, I made sure no one else did either. The words hung there. Ugly. Raw. True. She took a shaky breath. I told myself I was protecting her, but I just wanted to see what it felt like to be the one invited for once. And there it was. The confession she didn't even know she'd been carrying. A wound pretending to be pride. I sat across from her, the air heavy with something that wasn't hate anymore. It was exhaustion. We'd both lived too long in a house built from competition. And I was tired of fighting for rooms that never belonged to me. You know, I said softly, you could have just asked me to step aside. She looked up, eyes wide, fragile. Would you have? I thought for a moment. No, I said. But at least it would have been honest. That made her laugh, short, bitter, almost relieved. She wiped her face, smearing mascara into bruised shadows beneath her eyes. I ruined everything, she said. No, I corrected. You revealed everything. She nodded, slowly, like someone finally seeing the wreckage in daylight. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I know, I replied. That's not why you came. Her eyes lifted to mine, searching for the old softness that used to live there. And maybe for a second she found it, because I did feel something shift. Not forgiveness, but release. I stood up and walked to the window, the sky outside dimming to a slow gray. You should go, I said quietly. But next time you want to destroy something, at least admit it's about you." She didn't argue. She just nodded, stood, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she paused, her hand on the handle. "Does she know?" she asked, meaning my daughter. "Not yet," I said, "but she will." When the door closed, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. You ever have that moment when truth finally cleans a room that's been dirty for years? That's what it felt like. Not peace exactly, but clarity. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low and deliberate. And I thought, maybe some storms don't come to destroy. Maybe they come to clear the air. Sometimes telling the story is the only way to make the ground stop shaking. Subscribe to the channel and tell me, where are you listening from right now? I started writing the letter the same night Claire left. The house felt heavier than usual, as if the truth she'd confessed was still floating in the air, too thick to breathe, too real to ignore. The rain hadn't stopped since afternoon. It kept tapping softly on the window, like the world was asking, "And now what?" And I didn't know, so I did what I always do when I don't know. I wrote. I took out an old piece of stationery I'd been saving for something special. The edges were yellowed with time, the paper smooth under my fingers. At the top I wrote, "To the baby who doesn't know any of this yet." For a long time I didn't write another word. I just stared at the page, listening to the storm outside and the clock ticking somewhere in the dark. Then finally, the words came. "You don't know me yet," I wrote, "but I already know you'll arrive into a house full of noise. Not the good kind, not laughter or love. The kind of noise that pretends to be normal but keeps people from hearing what's real. You'll see pictures on walls that don't tell the full story. You'll grow up hearing who was right and who was wrong, but the truth, little one, is softer than that. It lives in the in-between, where love and pain shake hands quietly in the dark. Your mother is strong, too strong sometimes. She learned to build walls before she learned to breathe. And when you grow inside her, you'll feel it. That mix of fear and tenderness, of apology and hope. She's trying. Even if she never says it out loud, she's trying to make sure you never have to live the kind of silence she's still healing from. I stopped writing and looked at the words. Black ink on pale paper, trembling slightly where my hand had hesitated. The rain outside was slowing down now, turning from a storm into something gentler, almost rhythmic. I thought about the baby, a life that had nothing to do with the mess we'd made, yet would carry pieces of all of us anyway. That's the cruel magic of family. Even when you try to protect the next generation, some ghosts still find their way through. I wrote again. When you're old enough, I'll tell you about the day your mother forgot to invite me to her baby shower. Not because I want you to take sides, but because I want you to understand that even love makes mistakes. Especially love. And if you ever have to choose between keeping peace and telling the truth, choose truth, even if it costs you peace. The kind of silence that hides pain will always grow louder inside you until it breaks something important. I paused, resting my pen. The wind was still moving outside, carrying the smell of wet soil, that earthy scent that always feels like both ending and beginning. And I thought, maybe this is what healing smells like. The pen was starting to dry out, its ink fading near the edges of each word. But I kept writing, because some things aren't meant to be perfect, only honest. One day you'll see a picture of me, I wrote, and maybe no one will tell you the full story behind my eyes. They'll say I was proud, or stubborn, or quiet, all of which are true. But what they won't say is that silence was the only language I had left when no one wanted to listen. Don't inherit that silence. Break it, gently. When you feel something, say it. When you love someone, tell them before the world convinces you to wait. The people who matter won't ask you to shrink so they can shine. And if they do, Remember, you come from a line of women who learned to grow even in the dark." I stopped there for a moment, staring at the candle on the table. Its flame wavered as if reacting to every breath I took. There was something holy about that flicker, a reminder that even light trembles sometimes, but it never apologizes for burning. I took a sip of cold coffee, then continued. "Your mother and I, we broke something between us. But we're building again. Maybe slower this time, maybe with scars showing, but stronger. Because that's what real love does. It rebuilds after the storm, even if it looks different than before. If I'm not here when you're old enough to read this, I want you to know something. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a hallway you keep walking down, step by step, with the lights flickering as you go." I felt tears gather. Not the kind that ache, but the kind that release. It's strange how writing to someone who doesn't exist yet can make you feel more real yourself. "You'll grow up in a world that keeps score," I added, "but don't let it teach you that love is a transaction. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing, again and again, even when it hurts. Especially then." I signed it, finally. "Your grandmother, who learned that silence can be strength, but truth is freedom." When I folded the letter, I pressed it flat between my palms like sealing a prayer. Then I placed it inside an envelope and wrote a single word on the front. Someday. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street glistened under the porch light, the air thick with the smell of something washed clean. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a witness. To my own survival, to the small, trembling possibility of peace. You ever realize healing doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm, but like dawn? Quiet. Persistent. Refusing to ask for permission. I blew out the candle, let the room go dark, and whispered to the night, "She'll read it when the world is kind enough for her to understand." Sometimes, telling your story is the only inheritance that matters. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from right now? It was early morning when the call came. Not a message, not a voicemail, a call. Her name lighting up my phone for the first time in months. I let it ring once, twice, my heartbeat rising to meet the sound. Then I answered. "Mom?" Her voice was soft, thin, the kind that carries exhaustion and wonder all at once. "She's here," she whispered. "The baby. She's here." For a moment I couldn't speak. All the words I thought I'd rehearsed, all the things I swore I'd say, disappeared into the hum of that sentence. She's here. Time folded in on itself. Every memory, her first cry, her first step, the smell of her hair when she fell asleep on my shoulder, came rushing back. And now, she was the one holding a daughter. My granddaughter. "Is she healthy?" I asked, barely above a breath. "Yes," she said. "She's perfect." Silence stretched between us. Not heavy this time, but fragile, like a thread that could finally hold again. Then she said it. "Will you come?" The words hit me harder than I expected. 3 syllables that carried every apology she couldn't yet say. And all I could answer was, "Yes, I'll come." The hospital was quiet when I arrived. That antiseptic smell, sharp, clean, unforgiving, filled the halls. I moved slowly, following the sound of her voice down the corridor. When I stepped into the room, the world shrank to a single image. My daughter, pale and beautiful, her hair messy, her eyes swollen from tears, and in her arms, a small bundle wrapped in pink. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't look like a stranger. She looked like my little girl again. "Mom," she whispered. "Meet her." She held the baby out to me, and I hesitated for just a second, that tiny pause between fear and forgiveness. Then I took her. She was warm, so impossibly small, yet heavy with everything we hadn't said. Her fingers curled around mine like instinct, like memory passed through blood. And something inside me broke. Not in pain, but in awe. Because in that moment, I realized how life has a cruel way of giving us second chances disguised as first breaths. I looked at my daughter. She was crying, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "I didn't know how to fix it," she said. I nodded. "You didn't have to." She just did. The baby yawned then, that tiny, perfect sound, and the whole world seemed to soften. The walls, the air, even the years between us. Have you ever felt forgiveness arrive without warning? Like a quiet visitor, standing in the doorway of your heart, asking nothing, just waiting to be let in. That's what it felt like. The nurse left us alone after a while. The room dimmed, soft lights humming against the pale blue walls. Outside, the city was just waking. Car doors, distant sirens, the faint rhythm of morning rain beginning again. It felt almost sacred. My daughter had fallen asleep, her face turned toward the window. I sat in the chair beside her bed, the baby nestled in my arms, her tiny breaths warming the space between my chest and the world. For a long time, I didn't move. I just watched her, the way her eyelids fluttered as if she was dreaming of something ancient, the way her fingers twitched, searching for a comfort she didn't yet understand. And then, slowly, I started to hum, a song my mother used to sing to me, and I to my daughter, before silence became our only language. The sound was low, fragile, like memory trying to heal itself. I whispered, "You have no idea how many hearts had to break for you to get here." It wasn't bitterness. It was truth. The kind that's too heavy to say out loud until you're holding something new enough to deserve it. The baby stirred, made a small sound, halfway between a sigh and a question. And I thought, maybe she already knows. The door creaked open, and my daughter blinked awake. She watched us for a moment, me and her child, and something shifted in her gaze. Not guilt, not shame, recognition. Like she was seeing a map she'd been lost from, finally finding her way back. "She likes you," she said quietly. I smiled. "She doesn't know better yet." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that starts as pain, but lands as release. For the first time in years, we weren't mother and daughter navigating wounds. We were just two women who had survived themselves long enough to begin again. "Mom," she said softly. I named her Grace. "Grace, of course." I nodded, unable to speak, because there it was, the ending and the beginning in one breath. She reached out, resting her hand over mine, the baby between us. The silence no longer sharp, just gentle. I looked at her and said, "She'll never have to earn love, not like we did. Promise me that." She nodded. "I promise." Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were clearing, sunlight pressing against the window like a blessing that refused to stay out. And I realized this wasn't redemption. It was continuation. Love, reshaped. History, rewritten in softer ink. Have you ever held something so small, and yet felt the universe exhale through it? That's what it was. Not forgiveness, not closure, just grace, in its truest, most quiet form. Sometimes telling your story is how you pass the light forward. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from right now? 3 days after the birth, she asked me to stay. Not in words exactly. She just said, "Don't go yet." Her voice barely above a whisper as she adjusted the blanket over the baby's crib. So I stayed. The house smelled like new life and sleepless nights. Milk, soap, and the faint hum of exhaustion that always comes with love you haven't learned to manage yet. She made tea for us. Chamomile, because she remembered it's the only thing that still calms me. We sat in the kitchen, the same place where years ago everything had broken. But now the air was different. Softer, tentative, honest. She kept her hands wrapped around the mug, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from it. "I keep thinking about that day," she said finally. "The baby shower." I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear what she'd been carrying all this time. "I thought if I didn't invite you," she said, "it would make things easier. That if you weren't there, I wouldn't have to see how much you still make me feel like a child. But when you stopped talking to me, I realized I didn't feel like an adult either. I just felt lost." I looked at her. The girl who once needed me for everything, now confessing how deeply she'd needed me, even in the act of pushing me away. "Why didn't you just say that?" I asked. She smiled weakly. "Because I thought mothers didn't need to be told they were loved." That line caught me off guard. Simple, but sharp. It's strange, isn't it? How our children grow up thinking we're unshakable, while we spend our lives quietly hoping they'll notice when we tremble. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her skin was warm, familiar, fragile. "I wasn't angry because you hurt me," I said. "I was angry because you forgot I'm human." Tears slid down her face. Not loud ones, but the kind that carry understanding instead of regret. "I know," she whispered. "And I think that's what scared me. Seeing you break meant I had to see myself too." We sat there in the stillness, the clock ticking, the baby's soft breathing coming from the next room. And for the first time, the silence didn't separate us. It held us. You ever notice how healing doesn't happen in the grand apologies, but in the small, trembling sentences that sound almost like breathing? That's what this was. Breathing. Together. Again. The light outside had softened into that late afternoon gold that makes everything look kinder than it really is. The baby was asleep in the next room. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it was just us again. Mother and daughter. She looked at me carefully, like she was memorizing my face. "Do you ever wish you'd done things differently?" she asked. I smiled, though it came out a little sad. "All the time," I said. "But the truth is, if I'd done everything right, you might never have learned to see me as a person. You'd still think I was just a mother." She nodded slowly, like she was tasting the weight of that. "I think that's what I'm learning now," she said. "That loving someone means seeing the parts of them that aren't made for you." There was silence again. But this one didn't ache. It rested between us like understanding finally catching its breath. "I used to want to be nothing like you," she admitted. "And now, every time I hold her, I catch myself doing the things you did. The way you hummed when you thought no one was listening. The way you said her name before she even existed." Her voice broke. "You were always there, weren't you? Even when I tried to erase you." I swallowed hard. Of course I was. That's what mothers do. We stay, even in the places we've been erased from. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't deserve how easily you forgive me," she said. And I told her the only truth I knew. Forgiveness isn't easy. It's just heavier to carry the other thing. For a long time, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, hands clasped, tea gone cold, the air humming softly between us. There was no grand reconciliation, no cinematic ending. Just two women, facing each other across a small wooden table, choosing peace over pride. When the baby stirred in the next room, she stood and whispered, "She's awake." I nodded. "Go," I said. "She needs you." But before she walked away, she turned and asked, "Do you want to hold her again?" And the way she said again, gentle, open, unafraid, felt like a door swinging wide. I stood up and followed her. The baby was squirming in the crib, fists curled, eyes blinking up at the light. When I lifted her, she fit perfectly into the space between what had been lost and what was beginning again. "She's lucky," my daughter whispered. "She'll grow up knowing we fought for this." I looked down at the baby and smiled. "No," I said softly. "She'll grow up not needing to." The sun broke through the clouds then, a slow gold warmth spilling across her tiny face, across ours. And in that light, everything finally felt balanced. Not perfect, not repaired, just real. You ever realize that peace doesn't come when everything's fixed, but when you stop needing it to be? That's what it was, the quiet after years of noise. Sometimes telling your story is the only way to end it with your heart still open. Subscribe to the channel and tell me, where are you listening from right now? A year. It's strange how quietly a year can pass once you stop counting the days in pain. Seasons shift, people soften, and the air in the house changes. Not because everything's perfect, but because the echoes have finally learned to rest. I still wake early. Old habits. The house feels different now, though. Lived in again. Warm. On the kitchen table, there's always something small. A bib, a pacifier, a forgotten sock. Tiny reminders that life found its way back into this place. Grace just turned 1. She has her mother's eyes and somehow my stubborn mouth. When she smiles, I swear the room forgives itself. They visit almost every day now. Not out of guilt, out of rhythm. It's become part of us again, like breathing. My daughter always knocks, even though I tell her she doesn't have to. I think she likes the ritual of asking to be let in. A small gesture that says, "I remember." Sometimes, when Grace falls asleep on my shoulder, I feel my daughter watching us. And I can tell she's still healing. That kind of quiet repair that doesn't show on the surface but hums beneath the skin. Last week she asked me, "Do you ever think about what happened?" I told her the truth, only when I forget how far we've come. We talked about it more than I thought we would. The baby shower. The silence. Claire. There's still a sting when her name comes up, but it doesn't wound anymore. It's just history. A bruise that's finally fading, proof of something survived. Sometimes I catch myself staring at my daughter, how she hums to her child, how she moves with that mix of caution and grace that motherhood gives you. And I realize she's not just my daughter anymore. She's someone's mother, someone's beginning. That's what time does. It doesn't erase pain. It rewrites it into something you can hold without shaking. The letter I wrote to Grace is still in my dresser. Sealed. Waiting. I'll give it to her someday, when she's old enough to ask about the stories that lived before her. For now, it's enough to watch her live freely inside a world I once had to survive. Sometimes I sit on the porch after they've gone. The house is quiet again, but it's not the kind of quiet that hurts anymore. It's the kind that breathes. Birdsong in the distance. The hum of life returning. All the small sounds that mean peace has learned the address of this place. The garden is fuller now. Roses where there used to be weeds. Grace's tiny footprints pressed into the soft earth near the lilac tree. She likes to toddle barefoot through the grass, laughing at the wind, and every time I hear that sound, that pure, unguarded joy, I feel something in me lift. Like the part of my heart that once went dark has found its light again. My daughter sits with me most evenings now. No big conversations. Just small things. How Grace wouldn't nap. How she's learning to say mama. How life feels gentler now that she's stopped trying to control it. We don't talk about the past much. Not because we've forgotten, but because it's finally stopped needing to be rewritten. The last time Claire called, I answered. Her voice was softer, older somehow. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. We just talked. Two women acknowledging that some distances never close completely, but they can stop bleeding. And that, I think, is enough. When the sun sets, the sky outside turns the color of old gold. I always pause then, let the last light touch my face, and I whisper the same words, almost like a prayer. We made it. There's something sacred about the quiet that comes after survival. It doesn't celebrate. It doesn't demand. It just exists. Simple, clean, whole. Grace will never know the full story. She'll grow up surrounded by women who learned the hard way how to stay soft. And maybe that's the truest kind of legacy, to hand the next generation a world lighter than the one you carried. I still keep the letter for her, folded neatly in its envelope marked someday. I think I'll know when it's time. Not when she's old enough, but when she's ready to ask, who were we before I arrived? And when that day comes, I'll tell her. Not the pain, not the silence, but the way love found its way back, inch by inch, breath by breath, through storms, through shame, through grace. Because that's what we are now. Grace. Not just her name, but our story. A circle finally closed. Not in perfection, but in peace. You ever notice how healing doesn't sound like fireworks? It sounds like laughter from another room, like a baby learning your name for the first time, like forgiveness whispered into ordinary days. That's where I am now, in the quiet, still here, still healing, still telling. Sometimes, telling your story isn't about reopening the wound. It's about proving you survived it. So if you've made it this far with me, thank you. Subscribe to the channel and tell me, where are you listening from right now?